very much. Very good. Megan, where are you at? Are you nervous about next Sunday night? No? Yeah. All right. Well, in that case, you can take the junior high and senior high and go. Boy, Jared, that's two of us throwing you under the bus today. So wait until next Sunday night. She'll be wringing her hands. So I'm really looking forward to next Sunday night and his sermon. You're going to enjoy it, and his skills are already very good. I'm going to continue on with the series that we've been in. What should I believe? What do I believe about the church? The church. Let's talk about the church just for a moment. Just hearing the term makes all of you have some thought that just automatically comes to mind, brings an image for you. It may be a shape, a location, a size, whatever it is. Let's think about the shapes of churches. Well, there's the traditional, some call it old-fashioned. Look around, that's us. That song was like an old-fashioned type of song that takes some of us back into the 60s, and we think about that. Folks, they call that old-fashioned today. And now, personally, I like old-fashioned. I like looking and seeing a church building look like a church building. That's just me. You don't have to feel that way. I'm going to give you some other options. There's contemporary buildings. I get a kick out of them. They are sprawling. They look like shopping centers to me. I can remember us going into one on a vacation once, and this was a great big church. Just trying to find our way around. Somehow we ended up in the youth program. We missed the guy that was giving directions. There's stained glass. I love our stained glass. If you look around in the window in the back, and our best window's right here through this door, but you got to have special permission to go through there to see it. No, I'm not. You don't have to have. But there's an angel right there. Looks a lot like me. It's a beautiful stained glass window. Now, stained glass is great, but you know, there's a lot of churches with no glass. I'm amazed at the ones that I'm starting to see that are blacked out. Now, you know why that is? Because their preacher isn't there. They're on a great big screen, and so they black everything out. So if you see one of those that the windows are all blacked out, you can pretty well be assured that they don't have a preacher in the pulpit that particular morning. So there's the shapes. There's all sorts of locations. Remember this one? There's a church in the valley by the Wildwood. Remember that? There's those old country churches. The place where we started was an old country church, and it was a good 10 miles from town, but it was good. Then there's the large campuses that we've already talked about, and they're major. They're storefronts. Some of the storefronts are pretty amazing as well to me. There are those churches that are landlocked, and there are those that have parking and those that have no parking. So that's all. I've got all of that under location. Whenever you think about parking, I like to be able to get to my car. You ever been to one of those churches where you have to take a shuttle? You take a shuttle to get there. That means you got to take a shuttle to get back. They don't run that if you want to leave early. So if you're planning to leave early today, there is no shuttle to our parking lot, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. For anyone who is watching us on tape, we have 3 major parking lots. There's the upper, the lower, and the one out back. So, but you don't need a shuttle to get there. You can walk there. Then there's all sorts of sizes of churches. There's the small church. David preached to about 20 people last week. They needed a preacher, and I was very glad that he would accept that and go out there for us. There's the medium-sized churches. There's large churches. Back in 1977, whenever I first come here, do you realize this is 40 years ago that I come here? Holy mackerel. So I haven't aged any. Some of you have really gotten older. Back in 40 years ago, we were a church of a little over 200, and that was considered on the small size of large. Because a lot of churches 40 years ago, if you had a church of 500, you had the big church. Well, today, if you have a church of 500, that's where small is. 500 is in the small churches today. Do you know where that puts us? Well, since we're about 5,000, we're up here. So we've got 3 parking lots. I'm really selling this on the tape for anyone who watches us, so I want you to know that. So there's the medium, there's the large, and then there's what they call the mega churches. All of those are images that come to our mind. So when we think of the church, we may associate with some of these images or activities, or we may associate with ministry. And while shape and location and size and activities, that may describe a particular ministry going on or a particular place, that's really not what the church is. Now please catch that. So what is the church? What is it really? Well, today that's where we're going to go. What should I believe about God's church? What should I believe about God's church? First, the church is not about building. It's not about wood or brick or stone or whatever it might be. It's not about location, and it's not about the size. The church is the people. You are the building blocks of God's church. The Scripture is very explicit about that. But we're going to go to Matthew chapter 16, if you'd like to go there with me. Verses 13 through 16. We're going to read 16 and following. Now this is the place where we have Peter's good confession. Simon Peter answered, Jesus had just got through saying, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Wow, let's look at this. The very first thing is the foundation. The foundation of what we call the church is built on Christ. Now, whenever you read the statement, he's not saying that he's building on Peter. He's building on Peter's statement. Peter's statement was, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." That's the foundation that we are going to build upon. Not upon Peter. Peter was in my books, he was the leading apostle. You all know that. I like Peter a lot. I think he's a fantastic man of God. But we're not building on that. We're building upon the foundation that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now that's the very start of understanding who we are. Now that foundation is vital to getting this message out. So the next part is the message. He said, "And I will give you the keys to the kingdom." So what is the keys to the understanding the kingdom? That's Christ. Once again, that's Christ. Understanding Jesus as Christ, Messiah, Son of God, to unlock the mysteries that God has before us. Folks, I want all of you to take just a moment and think about all the mysteries that you've read about in Scripture. Wow, whenever we look at some of these things, they're just amazing to us. As I see, I'm particularly reading the last few years a great deal of Old Testament over and again, and I continue to refresh myself with that, and I start seeing God reveal Himself throughout all sorts of occasions. But sometimes it's a mystery. Now, what answers the mystery? Jesus, the Messiah. Whenever we see it all being fulfilled and brought right down to the fact that Jesus is God's Son, and now it all starts fitting together. It's like a great puzzle, and it all starts coming together, and we can see what God's plan is. We'll get into that just a little bit more as we go. The church is God's instrument to spread the good news. So whenever we're thinking about the building, folks, the building can't spread the good news. People spread the good news. So the church is God's instrument to spread the good news. See, the church, it didn't happen by accident. Let's start looking at how God unfolded it. Remember the Old Testament? Let's go back to the time of Abram or Abraham. Whenever God had called him and was going to send him into a land that would be for him, and he would leave his home and his family, and he would move into a land that would eventually become the promised land. Do you remember one of the first things that Abraham did? He set up an altar. An altar. Let's call that the first church. Here's the first church where Abraham has come. He was Abram at the time, but he has come to a place where he really realizes that God has something for him. And he piles some stones up, makes it a special place. That special place would stay there. If you read throughout Genesis, you're going to find that it is still there even years and years and years later. That this is where Abram first spoken to God, or where God first spoken to him. Let's call that the church. That was the first indication that there was going to be a relationship between man and between God. Now that should be an indication to us that God's had a plan all along to develop this relationship that we have. Well, the next part's going to be the tabernacle. Now what's the tabernacle? You might call it the tent of meetings. The tabernacle is once the nation has got assembled together, they've got this tent. And it's going to be designed similarly to the temple. There's going to be a place where they're going to go in and worship, and there's going to be requirements, and God is going to have special things that are in there for the thing of worship. But it's a tabernacle, it's a tent. It's movable. There will be those who are designated to carry the poles. There's going to be those that are designated to carry every aspect of it. And you can read that in your Old Testament scriptures. There's responsibilities that they're going to have. And whenever they would move, it would be set up. There'd be responsibilities. And there would be certain areas around it. So I want you to think. Now the second part then of God's plan is the tabernacle. It's become a little more mobile. The third part, let's call that the temple. Now the temple is going to be established in Jerusalem, and the temple will become a magnificent place where we'll start to understand even more than before about sacrifices. I've always loved the story about the sacrifices and how the temple was designed, and how it would associate so much with Christ later if you would understand the typology. The temple, of course, being built in Jerusalem on the side there, and down the side there would be a spillway out the side of the hillside, the mountainside there where it was built. And whenever the altar, and they would have hundreds and hundreds of sacrifices on the altar. And the blood would run everywhere from the sacrifices. Now, whenever they would clean up then, afterwards, the day of sacrifice had been given, they would literally wash the area down. And it was well designed, and there would be a drain, and down on the side, coming out of the side would be the water and the blood. Does that tell you about anything else that took place? Remember the crucifixion, the water and the blood coming out of the side? That's what would take place. So all of a sudden we've got this typology that God has designed to help us understand the church. And we called it the temple. And people would come there. They would come from all over to worship and to get to know God. And they would learn about sacrifice and what was going to be required. And now that takes us then to the synagogue. Now once again, synagogues are being set up now in other towns. And what would the Apostle Paul show us? That when he first went into a community, what would he do? He would go to the synagogue and see who was going to worship there. And see if he could start a conversation about the Lord. And then finally to the church. See, the church wasn't an accident. It was established with a purpose. So whenever the church of Christ, the church of God was established, it was established for us to understand it as a purpose. So what should I believe about it? We have to believe, folks, that this is not a modern day assembly. That it is something that started so long ago so that we could have an understanding and a relationship with God. The church is designed with a purpose. Now that purpose is threefold. It's to worship. So today, whenever you come in here, you should have been prepared. And I do believe in preparation. I think it's one of those things where you need to be preparing before you ever get here. First of all, you're preparing all week long in your time of prayer. If I was to give instructions, I would say every Sunday morning you should get up and start preparing to worship. That maybe it's a time when you're going to have a special time of devotion and open up that devotion or open up the scripture and get ready to come in here in the building. This is just a building. It's a special building to me. I would fight for it. I love this old building. And for all of you, understand it's a building. You are the church. And now I need to be prepared to come in here to assemble and meet with others. So we start preparing. So the first thing is worship. Now part of the job of the church is to make disciples. So we start helping people to become students of God. Then we teach them from there. Once you're a disciple, we want to teach you so that you can develop even further into understanding God's will. So the very first thing what should I believe about the church? Well, I have to believe that it is indefinitely established with a purpose. That it was built upon the foundation of Christ and nothing else. It's not like a modern day club, folks. I can remember someone once telling me, well, I got to pay my dues. There's no dues. There's no dues. Now, if you want to pay dues, I'll write you out a receipt. But there's no dues. There's offerings. And what's an offering? Very much like back to the temple, or back to the tabernacle, or back to the times of worship where we bring a gift to God. We shouldn't see gifts that we bring, the offerings that we bring. First of all, your tithe is a responsibility. Second, whatever you give above the tithe is a gift that you are giving to God. Wow. That's good stuff. Even if I said it myself, that's good stuff, folks. That's just really good. So that's what the church is all about. So how should I believe this purpose is accomplished? The church will help us fulfill this purpose in a two ways. The very first one I've called corporate. That means that we do it as combined group, as one. The body's a believer. The church is a living body working together so that we can all work together to accomplish one thing. Ecclesiastes, if you'd want to turn over to that in chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, it's going to say something like this. Two are better than one because they have a good return on their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. So the question is often asked, can I be a good Christian and not go to church? And most preachers would say, I'm not going to try that. But I don't know what they would say, because they would all have a different answer. Can I be a good Christian and not go to church? Well, folks, the church was designed with a purpose, that we would help one another up. Let's look at the very first part of what he said here, because they have a good return for their work. As we work together, we are able to accomplish so much more than one person could. As we are able to send out school supplies, whether it's the coats or the paper or the pencils that we do, whatever it might be, all of us working together, we accomplish a lot more than one of us could. Last year we bought, through you, around $3,000 worth of supplies that went to our school. We've just taken getting ready another big load to go over for the new semester. Isn't that wonderful? Now that happened because the church working corporately together. Working corporately together, not so much this year because it's been a mild winter, but last year we gave away 25 new coats. Working corporately together. As we work corporately together, we're able to see the fall festival, or we're able to see the breakfast. All of us working together for one accord and one purpose. That's what the Ecclesiastes is talking about. Then the second part, it says, if one falls down, his friend can help him up. As a church, we can become an accountability group. And whenever someone stumbles, instead of kicking them and helping them all the way to the ground, we kind of catch them. Try to hold them up. Try to help them along. So do you encourage or do you discourage? Whenever you come in, are people really glad to see you, or they say, oh, here he comes? Which is it? Because the church is one who is going to help someone that is stumbling or someone who is failing and going to help them to their feet. That's what the church is going to do. Do you build up or do you tear down? Man, you are looking really good, or, whoo, what happened to you? Which is it? Do we build down or tear up? Because sometimes we just tear people up by the things that we have to say. But we need to be able to build them up. Encourage them. Do you compliment or do you grumble and complain? Does anyone know any grumblers and complainers? I can think of a few. Yeah, most of us know some grumblers or complainers. But isn't it much better when someone will come up and go, wow, I'm blessed. I'm encouraged. I feel strength. Folks, that's the job of the church. That's what we are to do as the body of believers. Now, this whole building encourages me whenever I drive by. When it encourages me more? When our parking lots are full. I feel a whole lot better about it when I drive by and our parking lots are full. and I see that there's activities going on. We try to keep our building in use all the time. There's always something going on, and it's very rewarding to see the cars that are out there and people coming in and going. That's very rewarding. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. Now I want all of you to think about how you are encouraged. The building can't do it. It's those people going in and out. Now, I walk by, or I walk, when I do my walk, or whenever I drive by, I love the old building. I'll look and I'll take great pride in our facility. But that's what it is, a facility. It's when the people are coming in and out that the church is alive. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 through 25, is going to say something in this order. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Encourage one another all the more as we see the day approaching. Now, is it just me, or have others come to the conclusion that we're headed into the day that Jesus is going to come? I think most of us would start nodding our head, yes, it's going to happen. And we're starting to see some telltale signs of it. I'm not up here to give a prophecy. We're starting to see some telltale signs of it. My prophecy is this about the second coming of Jesus. God said it, that settles it. It's going to happen. Now, when's it going to happen? If it doesn't happen before next Sunday, you'll have cake. If it happens before next Sunday, you'll have streets of gold. All right? So just keep in mind one way or the other good things about God's Word. Whenever He tells us these things, we can count on them, and they're powerful. So He said, encourage one another. That we encourage one another. Not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. I want you to think about what we're seeing in our world today. I have been reading articles about how church attendance has plummeted. How church attendance is not what it was back in the 60s, the 70s, or even the 80s. Now, isn't that kind of scary? I know it scares me. And I know that there are others that say now church attendance isn't quite as important as it used to be. Here's what I've got to say to that. Don't come for a year and then come back and tell me how good that year's been for you. How close were you able to stay with God during that year? I don't like to miss it all. Because whenever I'm here, someone's going to lift me up. It doesn't matter if I'm here or if we're traveling and I attend church somewhere else, someone is going to lift me up. And one thing I've learned about life, it can pull me down. It can pull me down. So now do I want to be lifted up by Christ every week by assembling myself with other believers? Or do I want to try to go this by myself? I'm not good by myself. I will stumble and I will fall. I need others around me. The purpose of the church is the assembly together. So as you come, you should find encouragement. So the first part that we're going to see is that it's a corporate thing. That all of us are in this together. And that you have a responsibility as being a part of this corporate worship. You have a responsibility to participate. You have a responsibility to give. You have a responsibility to sing. You have a responsibility to encourage. God's given you that responsibility. And it started when Abraham came into the promised land. And he built an altar and talked with God. The next part of the responsibility, the second part of this twofold, is the personal. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, I love this verse. Each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various form. Each, individually, should use whatever gift you have been given. Use the gift that you have been given to serve others. Now, I want you to think about your service. Your service is more than just getting out of your car and walking in. You have a responsibility as an individual when you come in. Now, that responsibility will vary for all of us, but we have a responsibility, and we call it the church. The church. We have a responsibility at church. But you also have a responsibility as an individual to grow in knowledge. Now, in growing your faith, in growing your strength, what does that do for the rest of the body of believers, the rest of the corporate body of believers? It will encourage them and strengthen them as well. So as you grow, as you have your personal Bible study, as you attend small group Bible study, as you attend a Sunday school, whatever it might be, and you start growing as an individual, that's personal. And you will learn to serve others with the gift that God has given you. Now, I want you to think about some people that you know that have really been gifted. Gifted. And they're going to serve others. We have gifted singers. Gifted singers. And anyone will take note, I have never sang a special. All right? I'm not gifted in singing. I have trouble playing a radio and get it to come in right. Gifted. Gifted. We have gifted musicians. But now those are ones that you might think about. You got some people, at least in my experience, that are gifted in encouragement. Man, whenever I see them coming, I'm feeling good because I know they're going to lift me up. I know they're going to encourage me. We got others who are gifted in visitation. They'll go to a nursing home, or they'll go to a hospital, or they'll go somewhere and see someone, and they're gifted in that. We have some men who are gifted in being able to help fill pulpits for me whenever we have that opportunity. I think it's so important, and I'll go on record to this. I think it's so important that every church has its own preacher and stays alive. I think that's important. In our society today, we need men filling pulpits, and I'm so glad we've got some who will go and do that they're gifted in that area. Some are gifted in management, and they use it to serve others. There's all sorts of gifts, and that's what he will tell you in that passage. All sorts of gifts that are there. In Romans chapter 12, if you'd like to turn to that with me, Romans chapter 12, verses 6 through 8, it's going to say this. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him prophesy in proportion with his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. If it's teaching, let him teach. If it's encouraging, let him encourage. If it's contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it is leadership, let him govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. To serve. We have different gifts, and each of you have a gift. So the question about this thing about the church, the purpose, are you using the gift that God has given you? Or is it becoming stagnant? You ever hear the expression, use it or lose it? Or is it becoming stagnant? So what should I believe about the church, folks? I believe its role is clearly defined. The church is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Today we have learned to identify churches by buildings or denominations. We have learned to identify them by sizes or programs, by activities and ministries they offer. Some churches are even identified by their minister. I've been here long enough that sometimes we're identified by Mike. Whenever I walk in, it's Mike. But that's not who the church is. Some churches are friendly. We've always been accused of that. And some are cold. You ever been one of those where you walked in and no one's going to speak to you before you walk out? That's cold. You can describe the church in so many different ways. So let's think about what is the responsibility. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 12. So it is with you, since you are eager for gifts of the Spirit. I've been talking about spiritual gifts. Try to excel, get this, try to excel in those that build up the church. So here's the punchline today. Whenever you come, it ought to be about building up this body of believers. It ought to be about building up the church, encouraging them, helping them, strengthening them. We are in a war zone, folks. Oh, we're not living in the Middle East or any of those places. We are living in the middle of a spiritual war that is going on. And if the church doesn't stay encouraged, and if we are not building it up, it will be torn down. Most of us can think of churches that no longer exist. We can think of churches that have split over trifles. We can think of difficulties that have been created over unkindnesses. We can touch all of these things and realize church no longer exists there today. Now get this. We are living in a war zone. And there's a spiritual battle, the Scripture says, going on. So what is the purpose of the church? We need to build up. So why should I believe about the church today? I believe it is the very power of God right here on earth. I believe that it is the element of God that is going to change the course of history. Whenever we believe the church is all those things, we'll see things happen, folks, but not until we believe that it's the body, not the building. Well, today I'm anticipating one decision. There ought to be others made as well. Come and be a part of the body. Be a building stone here at the church. Will you all please stand as we have our invitation?